She hadn't slept in 3 days. Every morning the walk to school felt like walking through a nightmare. The threats were real. The danger was closing in, and no one was coming to help. Desperate, she did something no child should ever have to do. She walked up to the most feared group of men in town and asked them for protection. What happened next didn't just change her life. It exposed a darkness the entire town had been ignoring. And when 200 leather-clad bikers showed up at that elementary school, the bullies realized they'd made a terrible mistake. Before we dive into Aisha's story, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city and country in the comments right now. Are you watching from your living room in Texas, your kitchen in the UK, your office break room in Australia? Let me know, because this story about courage, community, and protection, it's universal. It crosses borders. And I want to see how far Aisha's message reaches today. All right, let's go back to where it all started. Aisha Johnson was 7 years old, just 7. She loved dinosaurs, collected stickers of puppies, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian someday. She lived with her mom, Tanya, in a small 2-bedroom apartment on Oak Avenue in Riverton, a quiet town where everyone knew everyone, where neighbors waved from their porches, and where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Tanya worked as a nurse at County General Hospital, pulling double shifts most weeks, just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Money was tight, but their home was filled with love. Every morning, Tanya would braid Aisha's hair before school. Every night they'd read together before bed. Aisha's laughter filled that little apartment. She was a happy child, a normal child. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed, and what started as schoolyard teasing would become something far more sinister. It began on a Tuesday in late October. Aisha was walking to her 2nd grade classroom when 3 older boys blocked her path in the hallway. Tyler Morrison and his cousin Jake were 5th graders, bigger, louder, meaner. The 3rd boy, another 6th grader named Connor, just stood there laughing. Tyler knocked Aisha's backpack off her shoulder, her books scattered across the floor. When she bent down to pick them up, Jake kicked them further down the hall. Other kids walked past, heads down, pretending not to see. Teachers were already in their classrooms, doors closed. "Look at the baby," Tyler sneered. "Going to cry, going to run to mommy." Aisha didn't cry, not then. She gathered her books with shaking hands and walked away. She told herself it was nothing. Just mean kids being mean. It would stop. But it didn't stop. The next day, they took her lunch money. The day after that, they shoved her into a locker. By the end of the first week, Tyler and Jake had made Aisha their favorite target. They'd wait for her in the hallways, follow her to the bathroom, whisper cruel things when teachers weren't looking. "Nobody likes you. You're ugly. Your mom's too poor to buy you real clothes." Aisha started taking different routes through the school, trying to avoid them. But Riverton Elementary wasn't that big. There was nowhere to hide. Week 2, the bullying intensified. Tyler started tripping Aisha in the cafeteria. She fell hard one day, her tray clattering to the floor. Food splattered across her shirt. The entire lunchroom erupted in laughter. Aisha ran to the bathroom and stayed there until lunch period ended. She stopped eating lunch after that. She'd hide in the library instead, pretending to read, her stomach growling. Jake began following her after school. He'd walk 20 FT behind her, just close enough that Aisha knew he was there, just far enough that she couldn't prove he was following her. Sometimes Tyler would be with him. They'd laugh and point. They'd shout things. "We know where you live, Aisha. Better watch your back. Tomorrow's going to be worse." Aisha started having nightmares. She'd wake up screaming, tangled in her sheets. Her mom rushing into her room, asking what was wrong, but Aisha couldn't explain it. The fear felt too big for words. She stopped playing with her toy animals, stopped drawing pictures. stopped smiling. Aisha Johnson, the 7-year-old black girl who loved dinosaurs and wanted to save animals, was disappearing inside herself. She was learning to be invisible, to be quiet, to survive. And the worst part, Aisha stopped being a kid. But Aisha didn't know these older boys were just the beginning. Someone else was watching her, someone dangerous. Tanya noticed the changes immediately. How could she not? Her daughter, her bright, chattering, curious little girl, had gone silent. Aisha stopped talking at dinner, stopped asking questions, stopped being Aisha. Then came the nightmares. 2, sometimes 3 times a night, Tanya would wake to the sound of her daughter screaming. She'd rush into Aisha's room to find her sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror, hyperventilating. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? Tell Mommy what's wrong." But Aisha would just shake her head and cry. Tanya started finding bruises on Aisha's arms, her knees, once a nasty scrape on her elbow that Aisha claimed was from falling on the playground. But Tanya had been a nurse for 12 years. She knew the difference between an accident and something else. One morning, Aisha refused to go to school. She locked herself in the bathroom, sobbing, begging her mom not to make her go. "Please, Mommy, please, I can't go back there. Please!" Tanya's heart shattered. She called in sick to work, held her daughter for an hour until the crying stopped, and made a decision. If you've ever felt powerless watching a child suffer, you understand what Tanya felt next. If this story is hitting home, let me know in the comments. Your voice matters here, because Tanya did what any parent would do. She went to the school. She demanded they protect her daughter, and what they told her would haunt her for years. The next morning, Tanya marched into Jefferson Elementary School with a fire in her chest. She'd taken yet another day off work, a day she couldn't afford to lose, but nothing mattered more than protecting her daughter. She requested an immediate meeting with Principal Hicks. 20 minutes later, Tanya sat in a cramped office across from the principal and the school counselor, Mrs. Patterson. The office smelled like stale coffee and copy paper. A clock ticked loudly on the wall. Tanya didn't waste time. She told them everything. The hallway incidents, the cafeteria, humiliation, the threats, the following, the bruises, the nightmares. Her voice cracked as she described finding Aisha sobbing in the bathroom, too terrified to go to school. "My daughter is being terrorized," Tanya said, her hands trembling. "Tyler Morrison and Jake Hendress are making her life a living hell. You need to do something. You need to protect her." Principal Hendricks leaned back in his chair, his expression indifferent, almost bored. "Miss Johnson," he said slowly, "I understand you're concerned, but from what I've observed, these are just normal childhood conflicts. Kids tease each other. It's part of growing up." Tanya stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. The counselor, Mrs. Patterson, jumped in with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Aisha is a sensitive child," she said gently. "Perhaps she's misinterpreting playful banter as bullying. Sometimes children need to develop thicker skin, learn to stand up for themselves, stand up for herself." Tanya's voice rose. She's 7 years old being targeted by children twice her size. Principal Hicks held up his hand. "Miss Johnson, please, let's not be dramatic. Boys will be boys. This is how children learn social dynamics. If we cuddle Aisha every time someone hurts her feelings, we're not preparing her for the real world. They said Aisha was too sensitive, that boys will be boys, that she needed to toughen up." Tanya left that office shaking with rage and disbelief. She'd come seeking help, seeking protection for her child, and they dismissed her. Worse, they blamed Aisha. But there was something Tanya didn't know. Principal Hicks had a secret, and it was about to put Aisha in even greater danger. That afternoon, Tanya went to the Riverton Police Department. If the school wouldn't help, maybe the police would. Officer Davis, a middle-aged man with gray at his temples, listened patiently as Tanya filed her report. He took notes, nodding occasionally, his pen scratching across the paper. "So, these older boys have been bullying your daughter," he summarized. "Verbal harassment, some pushing, following her after school." "Yes," Tanya said. "And I'm worried it's escalating. They know where we live. They're threatening her." Officer Davis set down his pen and gave her a sympathetic look. "Miss Johnson, I hear you. I do. But legally speaking, there's no crime here. Kids say mean things to each other. They push and shove. It's not pleasant, but it's not criminal." "They're terrorizing her," Tanya insisted. "I understand it feels that way," Officer Davis said carefully. "But we can't arrest children for schoolyard conflicts. The school should be handling this through their disciplinary process. The school won't do anything." He sighed. "Look, I'll make a note in our system. If anything escalates, if there's an actual assault, if the threats become specific and credible, call us immediately. But right now, my hands are tied. This is kids being kids. Call us if it gets serious. Kids being kids. The same phrase, the same dismissal." Tanya walked out of that police station feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. The people whose job it was to protect children. Educators, law enforcement had failed her daughter, and the frustration, the helplessness was suffocating. What Tanya didn't understand yet was something child psychologist Dr. Elena Martinez has spent her career studying. When institutions fail to protect vulnerable children, when adults dismiss their fear as oversensitivity, they don't just fail to solve the problem, they make it worse. They teach predators that they can act with impunity. They teach victims that no one will help them, and they create the conditions for escalation because bullies don't stop when they're ignored. They get bolder. That night, Tanya sat Aisha down for another conversation. She needed to understand exactly what was happening, needed details to figure out what to do next. "Baby," she said gently, holding Aisha's small hands. "I need you to tell me everything. Every single thing these boys have done, even the scary parts." Aisha was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice so small, Tanya had to lean in to hear it. Aisha said something that made Tanya's blood run cold. "It's not just Tyler and Jake anymore, Mommy." Tanya's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" There's a bigger boy in a car." "What bigger boy? What car?" Aisha's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know his name, but he's really big like a grown-up, and he drives a black car. He started following me home last week. At first, I thought it was just there, but then I saw him 3 days in a row. And yesterday?" "Yesterday?" "What, sweetheart?" "Yesterday, he rolled down his window and he said he knew where I lived. He said, I better watch myself." He was smiling, Mommy, but it wasn't a nice smile. Tanya felt ice spread through her veins. This wasn't schoolyard bullying anymore. This was a teenage boy, or possibly an adult, stalking her 7-year-old daughter, threatening her, following her home. Her little girl was being stalked, and the school, the police, they'd done nothing. They told her it wasn't serious enough. They told her to wait until something worse happened. How much worse did it need to get? Tanya held Aisha close that night, her mind racing. She'd call the police again tomorrow. She'd go back to the school. She'd do whatever it took. But Tanya had no idea that Aisha was about to take matters into her own hands, and her solution would change everything. Because sometimes when the system fails you, when the adults who are supposed to protect you turn away, you have to find your own way to survive. You have to find your own protectors. Even if you're only 7 years old, even if the protectors you choose terrify everyone else, if you believe no child should ever face this alone, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to show you what real protection looks like. Aisha didn't sleep for 3 nights straight. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that black car. She saw the man smile, cold and predatory. She heard his voice. "I know where you live." In her nightmares, the car followed her down endless streets. Sometimes Tyler and Jake were in the back seat, laughing. Sometimes the car doors opened and hands reached out for her. She'd wake up gasping, her pajamas soaked with sweat, her small heart hammering against her ribs. On the third night, Aisha woke up at 2 a.m. to a sound that made her stomach hurt. Her mom was crying. Tanya thought Aisha was asleep, thought she couldn't hear through the thin apartment walls. But Aisha heard everything. "I don't know what to do," her mom sobbed into the phone, talking to Aisha's grandmother. "Nobody will help us. The school won't listen. The police won't listen. And now there's some teenager threatening her, following her, and I can't. I can't protect her. I have to work. I can't be with her every second. What if something happens? What if I lose her?" Aisha lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to her mother break down. And something shifted inside her 7-year-old mind. Her mom couldn't protect her. The teachers couldn't protect her. The police couldn't protect her. Nobody was coming to help. So Aisha made a decision no 7-year-old should ever have to make. She was going to find her own protectors, and she knew exactly where to find them. For weeks earlier, back when Aisha's life was still normal, Tanya had taken her to Rosie's Diner for breakfast. It was a Saturday morning treat: chocolate chip pancakes for Aisha, coffee, and scrambled eggs for Mom. They'd sit in the corner booth and talk about Aisha's week, about her friends, about the book they were reading together. That particular Saturday morning, Aisha had noticed them immediately. The bikers, 8 of them, maybe 10, sitting at the long counter that ran along the diner's front window. They were huge men, leather vests stretched across broad shoulders, arms covered in tattoos. Their motorcycles gleamed in the parking lot outside, chrome and steel, powerful and loud. Aisha had never seen people like them before. They looked like characters from a movie. Dangerous, intimidating. Other customers gave them a wide berth, avoiding eye contact, speaking in hushed voices. But Aisha, curious as children are, watched them. She watched how they laughed together. Deep belly laughs that filled the diner. She watched how the biggest one, a man with a gray beard and kind eyes, left a huge tip for the waitress. She watched how they held the door open for an elderly woman struggling with her walker. How one of them carried her grocery bags to her car. They were scary looking, but they weren't scary acting. And Aisha noticed something else. Everyone was afraid of them. The other customers, even some of the adults. People looked at these men and saw danger. That morning, 7-year-old Aisha had a thought. If everyone is scared of them, maybe the bad people will be scared of them too. It was child logic, simple, pure, and it had lodged itself in Aisha's mind. Now, 3 weeks into her nightmare, 3 nights without sleep. Listening to her mother cry, Aisha remembered those men. She didn't know their names, didn't know they were Hell's Angels, didn't know their reputation or their history or anything about motorcycle clubs. She just knew they looked strong. She knew people were afraid of them, and she knew nobody else was going to help her. Wednesday morning, November 12th, 6:45 a.m. Aisha heard her mother turn on the shower. Tanya had the early shift at the hospital, 7 to 7, and she was running late as usual. Aisha had maybe 10 minutes before her mom would come to wake her up for school. Aisha didn't hesitate. She climbed out of bed already dressed. She'd slept in her clothes. Planning this, she grabbed her backpack, stuffed her favorite toy dinosaur inside for courage, and slipped out the front door while the shower was still running. The morning air was cold. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, just a pale gray light spreading across the sky. Riverton streets were empty except for a few early commuters driving past. Aisha started walking. 4 blocks, That's all it was. 4 blocks from her apartment to Rosie's diner. Aisha had walked it with her mom dozens of times, but alone in the pre-dawn darkness, those 4 blocks felt like 4 miles. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, from fear. What if they say no? What if they laugh at me? What if they're mean? What if Mom catches me before I get there? But a stronger voice answered back. What if they say yes? Aisha walked past Mr. Chin's grocery store, still dark, and shuddered. Past the laundromat where the machines hummed even this early. Past the empty lot where kids played basketball after school. With each step, her determination grew. This was her only chance, her only idea. If it didn't work, she didn't know what she'd do. But she had to try, because being scared of asking for help was nothing compared to being scared every single day. Scared to go to school, scared to walk home, scared to close her eyes at night. Aisha turned the corner onto Main Street. And there it was, Rosie's Diner. The neon sign flickering in the dim morning light and parked outside just like before a row of motorcycles. 8 of them, chrome glinting, leather seats gleaming. They were here. Aisha stood across the street from the diner for a full minute, frozen. Through the window she could see them. The same men from before. The big one with the gray beard sitting at the counter. Others in a booth. Coffee mugs, plates of breakfast, normal almost. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip her backpack straps to steady them. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every instinct in her 7-year-old body screamed at her to run, to go home, to hide. These were grown men, scarial-looking men, men her mother had told her never to approach strangers, men everyone else avoided. But Aisha thought about Tyler's fist connecting with her shoulder. She thought about Jake following her home. She thought about the black car, the man's cold smile. I know where you live. She thought about her mother crying, feeling helpless and alone. And Aisha took a step forward, then another. Then she was crossing the street. Then she was walking through the parking lot, weaving between the massive motorcycles that seemed to tower over her. Then she was pushing open the diner door, the little bell above it chiming. Conversation stopped, heads turned. The bikers looked at her. This tiny black girl in a purple jacket with a dinosaur backpack standing in the doorway at 6:55 in the morning alone. Aisha's legs felt like water. Her mouth was dry, but she walked forward. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. She walked right up to the biggest, most intimidating man she'd ever seen. The one with the gray beard and the leather vest covered in patches she couldn't read. The one whose arms were thicker than Aisha's whole body. Jack Ironside Sullivan, chapter president of the Riverton Hells Angels, looked down at this little girl standing in front of him, and he saw the tears in her eyes, the trembling, the absolute terror and absolute courage existing in the same small body. Aisha looked up at him. She opened her mouth, and she said the words that would change everything. What Aisha said next would stop these battle-hardened men in their tracks. And when they learned why she was asking, everything changed. Aisha looked up at the massive man with the gray beard and said the words she'd been rehearsing in her head for the entire 4B block walk. I need you to walk me to school. The bad people are trying to hurt me and nobody else will help. The diner went completely silent. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. Fork stopped moving. Every single person in Rosie's diner heard this tiny 7-year-old girl asked the most feared men in Riverton for protection. Jack Sullivan, chapter president of the Riverton Hells Angels, 52 years old, Marine Corps veteran of 2 tours in Iraq, had seen a lot in his life. He'd seen combat. He'd seen death. He'd seen humanity at its worst and occasionally at its best. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the sight of this terrified child standing in front of him, trembling but refusing to run. Jack slowly lowered himself down, crouching so he was at Aisha's eye level. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle, soft, the voice of a man who understood fear because he'd spent 20 years teaching young Marines how to face it. "Sweetheart," he said. "Where's your mama? Does she know you're here?" Aisha shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks now that she'd finally said the words out loud. "She's at home getting ready for work. She tried to help me. She went to the school and they said I was too sensitive. She went to the police and they said it was just kids being kids. But it's not just kids. There's bigger boys and they hurt me and follow me. And there's a man in a car and he knows where I live and I'm scared and nobody will help and I don't know what to do." It all came tumbling out in one breathless rush. 3 weeks of terror condensed into 30 seconds. And as Aisha spoke, Jack Sullivan's face changed. The confusion melted away, replaced by something harder, something protective, something furious. Behind him, Marcus Patterson, 6'4", 12 years Army Special Forces, known to everyone as Ghost, stood up from his booth. He walked over and knelt down beside Jack, his massive frame somehow making itself smaller, less threatening as he addressed this frightened child. "Little one," Marcus said in his deep, rumbling voice, "we're going to help you, but we need you to tell us everything. Can you do that? Can you tell us about these people who are hurting you?" Aisha nodded and began to talk. She told them about Tyler Morrison and his cousin Jake, about the hallway incidents, the cafeteria humiliation, the stolen lunch money, the bruises. She told them about being followed after school, about the threats, about the nightmares. And then she told them about the car. "It's black," Aisha said, her voice dropping to a whisper, and the boy driving it is really big, like a grown-up. He started following me last week, and 3 days ago, he rolled down his window and said he knew where I lived. He said, "I should watch myself." My mom called the police, but they said there was no crime yet. "Yet?" Jack repeated, his jaw clenching. "They said, yet?" Aisha nodded. "This car," Marcus said carefully. "Can you describe it more?" "What kind was it?" "I don't know cars," Aisha said, "but it had a sticker on the back window. A football sticker from the high school." Jack and Marcus exchanged a look. Then Jack asked the question he already knew the answer to. "Did you see the license plate, sweetheart?" Aisha recited the numbers she'd memorized out of pure survival instinct. And when she finished, Jack Sullivan's entire body went rigid. Because Jack knew exactly who Travis Morrison was, Jack stood up slowly, his knees cracking. He turned to the other bikers in the diner, made a subtle gesture with his head. 3 of them immediately stood and followed him to the far corner of the restaurant. Out of Aisha's earshot, they formed a tight circle, speaking in low, urgent voices. "Travis Morrison," Jack said, and the name alone made the other bikers tense. "Robert Morrison's kid, the councilman's son?" Marcus asked. "The same 17 years old. 3 formal complaints filed against him in the last 2 years. Harassment, assault, stalking. 2 involved girls from the high school. 1 involved a woman who worked at the grocery store, but nothing ever stuck. Daddy made it all disappear. Threw his weight around, threatened legal action, paid people off. The kid knows he's untouchable." Another biker, Tony Chains Rodriguez, spoke up, and the school angle, the principal who dismissed the mother. Jack's expression darkened. Principal Hicks, Robert Morrison's brother-in-law, married to his sister. The whole thing is a family protection racket. This wasn't just bullying. This was a powerful family using their position to protect a predator. They built a system where complaints disappeared, where victims were silenced, where a teenage boy with dangerous impulses was given free rein because his father held political power. And that predator had just made his biggest mistake. He'd targeted a child under biker protection. because Aisha might not have known what she was doing when she walked into that diner. But she'd just done something profound. She'd asked for help from men who understood exactly what it meant to protect the innocent. Men who'd spent their military careers doing precisely that. Men who weren't afraid of councilmen or principals or corrupt systems. If corruption like this makes your blood boil, comment, "No more protection for bullies." Every comment helps push back against this kind of abuse of power. Jack pulled out his cell phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, pulling up information he'd been keeping tabs on for months. Photos appeared. Councilman Robert Morrison shaking hands at fundraisers, cutting ribbons at community events, smiling for cameras. His son Travis standing beside him at a football game. That same cold smile Aisha had described. Principal Hendricks in the background of several photos, part of the family circle. "I've been watching Morrison for a while," Jack said quietly. "Suspected he was dirty, using his position to cover for his kid. But I didn't have proof. Didn't have victims willing to come forward because they knew the system was rigged." He looked back at Aisha, still standing by the counter, being given hot chocolate by Rosie, the diner's owner. Until now, Marcus crossed his arms. "So, what's the play?" Jack Sullivan had spent 20 years in the Marines. He'd fought wars and deserts halfway across the world. He'd led men into combat, made impossible decisions under fire, learned when to negotiate and when to bring overwhelming force. But this was personal. This was about a 7-year-old girl who'd been failed by every adult authority in her life, who'd been so desperate she'd walked up to strangers and asked for help because she had nowhere else to turn. And Jack was about to make a phone call that would shake this entire county. "Get everyone," Jack said. "Every chapter within 3 states. Every vet we know, every rider who's ever worn a patch, tell them we need them here by 8:30 this morning. Tell them why." He looked at his watch. 7:05. They had less than 90 minutes. And somebody called Aisha's mother. She's probably losing her mind right now. Jack Sullivan stepped outside into the cold morning air and started making phone calls. The first call went to Danny Reaper McNeil, president of the Pittsburgh chapter, 2 hours away. Jack kept it simple. 7-year-old girl being stalked by a councilman's son. School won't help. Police won't help. She came to us. "We're escorting her to school at 8:30. How many can you bring?" Danny's response was immediate. "We'll bring 20. Give me 45 minutes. The second call went to the Veterans Motorcycle Club in Harrisburg, the third to the Iron Riders in Philadelphia, the fourth to an independent club in Lancaster. Jack didn't explain much. He didn't need to. When you tell riders that a child needs protection, that she's been failed by every system meant to keep her safe, that she walked up to strangers because she had no one else, you don't get questions, you get answers. "We're coming. Count us in." On our way. Inside the diner, Rosie had sat Aisha down in a corner booth and brought her hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. The other bikers kept their distance, not wanting to overwhelm her, but they watched, protective, alert. This tiny girl had become their responsibility the moment she'd asked for help. By 7:15, Jack made another call, this one to Tanya Johnson's cell phone. Tanya answered on the first ring, her voice frantic and breathless. "Hello. Hello. Have you seen a little girl? 7 years old. Purple jacket. Miss Johnson. My name is Jack Sullivan. Your daughter is safe. She's with me at Rosie's Diner on Main Street." There was a moment of shocked silence. Then, "Who are you? Why is my daughter with you?" "I'm calling the police." "Ma'am." Jack interrupted gently. "Aisha came to us. She walked here alone this morning and asked for our help. She told us everything about the bullying, about Travis Morrison, about the school and the police turning you away. And ma'am, we're going to help her, but we need you here. Can you come to the diner?" Tanya was already grabbing her keys, already running for her car. "I'm 2 minutes away. Don't let her out of your sight." By 7:30 in the morning, the plan was set. Text messages had gone out to dozens of chapters across 3 states. Phone trees activated, emergency contact lists engaged. The word spread like wildfire through the motorcycle community. Child in danger, system failure, mobilized now. By Atombach, bikers were rolling out from everywhere. From Pittsburgh, 20 riders fired up their engines and hit the highway, their motorcycles roaring in formation. From Harrisburg, 15 veterans in leather strapped on their helmets and rode. From Philadelphia, a dozen members of an all-female riding club called their bosses, said they'd be late to work, and pointed their bikes toward Riverton. From small towns and big cities, from VFW halls and American Legion posts, from garages and driveways across Pennsylvania, riders heard the call and answered it. They came because one of their own had made the request. They came because a child needed protection. They came because when the system fails, the brotherhood doesn't. Tanya's car screeched into the diner parking lot at 7:22. She burst through the door, wild-eyed and terrified, and immediately spotted Aisha in the corner booth. The reunion was instant and emotional. Tanya swept her daughter into her arms. Holding her so tightly, Aisha squeaked. "Don't you ever do that again?" Tanya sobbed. "I thought something happened to you. I thought she couldn't finish the sentence." "I'm sorry, Mommy," Aisha whispered, "but I needed help." Tanya looked up, then really seeing the bikers for the first time. 8 massive men in leather vests covered in tattoos and patches watching this mother and daughter with surprising gentleness. Her first instinct was fear. These were exactly the kind of men she'd taught Aisha to avoid. But then she saw their faces, the concern, the protectiveness, the way they positioned themselves between Aisha and the door, instinctively guarding her. Jack approached slowly, keeping his movements non-threatening. He extended his hand. "Miss Johnson, I'm Jack Sullivan. I served 20 years in the Marine Corps. These men are my brothers. Most of them are veterans, too. Your daughter is one of the bravest people I've ever met. She walked up to complete strangers and asked for help because every adult in authority failed her. That takes courage most grown men don't have." He paused, letting that sink in. "Ma'am, your daughter is one of the bravest people I've ever met, and we're going to make sure she never has to be that brave again." Tanya looked at this man, this intimidating, leather-clad stranger, and saw something she hadn't seen in weeks. She saw someone who believed her, someone who understood the danger, someone who was ready to do something about it. She broke down completely. Weeks of frustration, fear, and helplessness poured out in gasping sobs. Jack handed her a napkin and waited patiently while she collected herself. "You'll really help her?" Tanya finally asked. "Ma'am," Marcus said from across the diner, "we're not just going to help her. We're going to make sure everyone in this town knows she's protected. No one will touch her. No one will threaten her. And Travis Morrison, he's about to learn what happens when you target the wrong kid." For the first time in weeks, Tanya felt hope. Real, genuine hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind, but the solid certainty that her daughter would be safe. But hope wasn't enough. Jack was about to send a message so loud, so undeniable that every predator in that town would hear it, and it would start in exactly 15 minutes, because at 7:45, the first wave of motorcycles arrived. 5 bikes rolled into the diner parking lot, then 8 more, then a dozen. By 8:00, the street in front of Roz's diner was lined with motorcycles, chrome and steel gleaming in the morning sun. American flags mounted on several bikes, snapping in the breeze. The rumble of engines echoed off the buildings. 50 bikes, then 70, then 100. They kept coming. Veterans and leather, gray-bearded grandfathers who'd served in Vietnam. Middle-aged men who'd fought in Desert Storm. Younger riders who'd done tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Women riders, mothers and grandmothers themselves, who understood what it meant to protect children. Entire families on bikes, fathers with their teenage sons riding beside them, learning what it meant to stand up for the vulnerable. They came from 3 states. They left jobs, called in favors, canceled plans, broke speed limits to get there in time because a 7-year-old girl had asked for help. And bikers, they answer that call. It's not about patches or clubs or rivalries. It's about the code. You protect those who can't protect themselves. You stand up for the innocent. You don't let predators win. By 8:15, the crowd had grown so large that police had to redirect traffic. Officer Davis, the same cop who told Tanya there was nothing he could do, stood on the sidewalk, staring in disbelief at the assembly forming in front of him. Jack walked through the rows of motorcycles, greeting riders, shaking hands, explaining the situation in brief, clipped sentences. Every biker he spoke to had the same reaction. Jaw clenching, eyes hardening, a nod of understanding. This was personal now for all of them. Inside the diner, Aisha pressed her face against the window, watching in amazement as the parking lot transformed into a sea of leather and chrome. She'd asked for help from 8 men. She'd gotten 200. At 8:25, Jack gathered everyone together. 200 riders in formation, engines idling, ready to roll. He gave final instructions, formation positions, speed limits, behavior expectations. This wasn't a show of force. It was a promise of protection. At 8:30 a.m., 200 motorcycles rolled toward Jefferson Elementary School. The sound was deafening, a sustained roar that echoed through Riverton's quiet streets. Windows rattled, car alarms triggered. Every person within 6 blocks stopped what they were doing and turned toward the sound. And nobody, not the bullies, not Travis Morrison, not even the principal, was ready for what was about to happen. Aisha stood in the parking lot of Rosie's Diner, holding her mother's hand, staring at the sea of motorcycles and leather-clad riders surrounding her. Tanya squeezed her daughter's hand, still processing what was about to happen. 200 bikers were about to escort her 7-year-old daughter to school. Jack Sullivan walked over to them, carrying something small in his hands. He knelt down in front of Aisha, his weathered face gentle. "Aisha," he said, "before we go, I want to give you something." He held up a tiny leather vest, child-sized, clearly made for someone much smaller than the massive men surrounding them. On the back, beautifully embroidered, were the words, "Protected by Angels." "This vest means something," Jack continued. "It means you're part of our family now. It means nobody hurts you without answering to all of us. It means you're never alone again. Would you like to wear it?" Aisha nodded, unable to speak. Jack helped her slip the vest over her purple jacket. It fit perfectly. Tanya had to turn away, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers who'd become protectors. "All right, little one," Jack said, standing up. "You're going to ride with me. Your mom will follow in her car, okay? I promise I'll keep you safe." Aisha looked at the massive motorcycle, then at Jack's kind eyes, then back at her mother. Tanya nodded, giving permission, even though every maternal instinct screamed that this was dangerous. But somehow she knew with absolute certainty that her daughter had never been safer in her life. Jack lifted Aisha onto the motorcycle, settling her in front of him where he could keep both arms around her as he controlled the bike. Marcus Patterson positioned his motorcycle directly to their left. Another rider, a woman named Linda Steele Martinez, pulled up on their right. Within seconds, 200 motorcycles formed a convoy around them, with Aisha and Jack at the absolute center. A protective formation that would make the Secret Service proud. The engines roared to life in unison, a sound so powerful it vibrated through Aisha's entire body. And then, for the first time in 3 weeks, Aisha smiled. A real, genuine 7-year-old smile of pure wonder and relief. The convoy began to roll. The sound was deafening, The sight was unforgettable. And for Aisha, sitting on that motorcycle surrounded by 200 guardians, it felt like being protected by an army of guardian angels, because that's exactly what they were. They moved slowly through Riverton streets, maintaining perfect formation. Traffic stopped. Pedestrians stood on sidewalks, mouths open, watching this unprecedented procession. Some people pulled out their phones recording. Others just stood in awe. The rumble of 200 Harley-Davidson engines echoed off buildings, announcing their arrival blocks before they appeared. Tanya followed in her car, tears still streaming, her heart so full it hurt. She watched her daughter, her terrified, traumatized daughter, sitting tall on that motorcycle, no longer hunched and afraid. Aisha was waving at people on the sidewalks. She was smiling. She was being a kid again. At 8:45 a.m., the convoy turned onto Willow Street and Jefferson Elementary School came into view. The scene at the school was chaos. Parents were in the middle of the usual morning drop-off routine, kissing kids goodbye, reminding them about after-school pickups, chatting with other parents. Then they heard it, that unmistakable roar of motorcycle engines growing louder, getting closer. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Parents froze. Kids pressed their faces against car windows. Everyone turned toward the sound, and then they appeared. 200 motorcycles rolled into view, moving in perfect formation. American flags snapping in the wind, chrome gleaming in the morning sunlight. At the center of this massive convoy was a tiny black girl in a purple jacket and a child-sized leather vest sitting on a motorcycle with a gray bearded man who looked like he could wrestle bears. Jaws dropped. Parents grabbed their phones. Kids pointed and shouted with excitement. Teachers rushed out of the building, drawn by the commotion. The playground, where children were waiting for the morning bell, erupted in amazed chatter. Principal Hicks emerged from the main entrance, his face going from confused to pale to absolutely bloodless as he realized what was happening. He recognized Aisha immediately, and he understood in that instant that his career was over. The motorcycles formed a protective perimeter around the entire school. They didn't park haphazardly. This was military precision. They created a wall of steel and leather, a barrier that said, without words, "This child is protected. This school is being watched. And if you've been complicit in harming children, your time is up." Jack brought his motorcycle to a stop directly in front of the school entrance. He helped Aisha down carefully, making sure her feet were steady on the ground. Marcus and Linda flanked her immediately. Tanya parked and rushed over, joining her daughter. 200 motorcycles formed a protective wall around that school. And when Aisha climbed off that bike and walked toward the entrance, every child, every parent, every teacher saw exactly what was happening. The most vulnerable child in that school was now the most protected. The students on the playground erupted in cheers. Little kids jumped up and down, pointing at Aisha, talking excitedly about the motorcycles. Older kids stood stunned, suddenly understanding that the quiet second grader they'd seen getting picked on had just arrived with an army. Aisha walked toward the school entrance. Her mother on one side, Jack Sullivan on the other, Marcus Patterson and Linda Panda Martinez flanking them like bodyguards. Other bikers formed a corridor, creating a pathway of protection. Aisha didn't walk with her head down this time. She didn't try to be invisible. She walked with her chin up, her small hand gripping Jack's massive one, protected and proud. But not everyone was celebrating. On the far edge of the playground near the basketball courts, Tyler Morrison and his cousin Jake stood frozen. Their faces had gone white. Their mouths hung open because walking directly toward them, having deposited Aisha safely at the school doors, was Marcus Ghost Patterson, 6'4", 250 lb of pure muscle, and he was staring right at them. Marcus walked slowly across the playground. Kids parted like the Red Sea. Other bikers had positioned themselves strategically, ensuring there was no escape route. Tyler and Jake were 12 and 11 years old, respectively, big for their ages, used to being the intimidating ones. But right now they looked like the children they actually were, scared children. Marcus stopped directly in front of Tyler. He looked down at this boy who'd spent weeks terrorizing a 7-year-old girl. Marcus crouched down slowly, bringing himself to eye level with Tyler. He spoke in a voice so quiet that only Tyler and Jake could hear him. The words were carefully chosen. No threats, nothing that could be called assault or intimidation legally. But the message was crystal clear. Whatever Marcus said, it made Tyler Morrison start crying. Right there on the playground in front of everyone, the school bully broke down in tears. Jake had already started backing away, tripping over his own feet in his haste to escape. Marcus stood up, gave both boys one last look, and walked back toward the school entrance. His job was done. What Marcus said would haunt Tyler for years. But that wasn't the real message. The real message was about to be delivered to someone far more dangerous. Because across the street from Jefferson Elementary, parked in the lot of a closed insurance office, sat a black car with a high school football sticker on the back window. Travis Morrison, 17 years old, had been watching. He'd planned to follow A-ish A again, maybe escalate his threats, continue his pattern of terrorizing vulnerable targets. It had always worked before. Daddy always made the problems go away, but when Travis saw the motorcycles, when he saw 200 bikers surrounding the school, when he realized this wasn't going to be a normal day, he started his engine. Time to leave. Time to disappear and let this blow over like everything else. He put the car in reverse. That's when 5 motorcycles pulled into the parking lot behind him, blocking his exit. Not aggressive, not speeding, just there, deliberately positioned so Travis couldn't move his car an inch. Travis's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His heart started pounding. He looked in his rear-view mirror and saw them dismounting, walking toward his car with unhurried certainty. Jack Sullivan approached the driver's side window. He didn't knock. He didn't need to. Travis rolled down the window because what else could he do? Jack leaned down, resting one massive forearm on the car door. He looked Travis Morrison straight in the eyes. This teenager who'd been stalking a 7-year-old, who'd been using his father's position to act with impunity, who'd never faced real consequences in his entire privileged life. Jack's voice when he spoke was calm, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath, cold and absolute. Travis Morrison. Jack said, "I know who you are. I know who your father is. I know what you've been doing to that little girl, and here's what's going to happen now. If you ever come within 100 yards of that little girl again, you won't be dealing with police. You'll be dealing with us. And we don't forget. We don't forgive. We protect our own. She's our own now. Understand?" Travis nodded frantically, unable to speak, his face drained of all color. "That goes for any child in this town," Marcus added from behind Jack. "You've got a problem with vulnerable people. That ends today. We'll be watching you, Travis, every day, everywhere you go. One wrong move, one hint that you're targeting someone who can't fight back, and we'll know, and we'll come find you." The 5 bikers stepped back, letting Travis's car move. He didn't wait. The moment the path was clear, Travis Morrison peeled out of that parking lot like the devil himself was chasing him. In a way, 200 devils were. Travis was scared, but Jack knew scared wasn't enough because Travis's father, County Councilman Robert Morrison, still had power, and he was about to use it. But what Councilman Morrison didn't know was that Jack had already made another call to someone Morrison couldn't intimidate. By 9:30 in the morning, the local news crews arrived. Channel 7 News, Channel 3, even a crew from the Pittsburgh affiliate. Jack had called them all at 7:45, right after organizing the escort. He'd given them a simple message. Child protection story at Jefferson Elementary. 9:30 a.m., bring cameras. The reporters set up quickly interviewing parents who were still lingering in the school parking lot, processing what they just witnessed. And once the cameras were rolling, once parents realized someone was finally paying attention, the floodgates opened. A mother named Jennifer Hay spoke first, her voice shaking with emotion. My son has been bullied at this school for 2 years. I filed complaint after complaint. Nothing ever happens. The Morrison boys do whatever they want, and the principal does nothing. Another parent, David Chun, stepped forward. My daughter was pushed down the stairs last month by Jake Morrison. She had bruises all over her body. I went to Principal Ricks, and he told me it was an accident. An accident? My daughter is terrified to come to school. More parents joined in. Story after story, pattern after pattern. The Morrison boys, Tyler and Jake, with their older brother Travis backing them up, had been terrorizing children for years. And every time parents complained, Principal Ricks dismissed it, made excuses, protected the boys because protecting them meant protecting his brother-in-law's political career. What started as one girl's desperate plea became a community reckoning. The silence was broken. The truth was flooding out. Years of suppressed complaints, ignored victims, and institutional failure were spilling into the open air, captured on camera, going out to thousands of viewers across Pennsylvania. But the real bombshell was about to drop because Jack had also called someone else. Someone who'd been investigating the Morrison family for months. At 9:55 a.m., an unmarked black sedan pulled up to Jefferson Elementary. A woman in a dark suit stepped out carrying a badge and a briefcase. Special Agent Victoria Chun, FBI. Jack walked over to greet her, shaking her hand like an old friend. Because they were old friends, they'd served together in the Marines 15 years ago, before Victoria had joined the Bureau and Jack had come home to Riverton. Jack, she said, when you called this morning, I thought you were exaggerating. I never exaggerate, Jack replied. You know that Victoria had been investigating Councilman Robert Morrison for 8 months. Political corruption, bribery, using his position to obstruct justice. But the case that had really caught her attention was the pattern of complaints against his son, Travis. Complaints that mysteriously disappeared. Witnesses who suddenly refused to cooperate, evidence that vanished from police records. Travis Morrison had been targeting vulnerable children for years. Children from poor families. Children whose parents didn't have the resources or connections to fight back. Children who could be silenced. Aisha Johnson was supposed to be another silent victim. Another complaint that disappeared. Another family that gave up because the system was rigged against them. But Aisha hadn't stayed silent. She'd asked for help from people who couldn't be intimidated or bought off. And now, with 200 witnesses, with news cameras rolling, with a community finally speaking up, Victoria Chun had everything she needed. Travis's harassment of Aisha. Victoria explained to Jack standing just outside the range of news cameras. It's part of a pattern. We've identified 7 other victims over the past 3 years. All children from vulnerable families, all complaints dismissed by either Principal Ricks or the local police department, both of whom have direct connections to Councilman Morrison. And Ricks, Jack asked, obstruction of justice. He's Morrison's brother-in-law, and he's been systematically dismissing complaints against the Morrison boys to protect his political connections. That's a federal crime when it involves witness intimidation and corruption of public institutions. The FBI had been building a case. They just needed victims willing to speak up. And now they had an entire community ready to testify. If you believe power shouldn't protect predators, smash that like button. Your engagement proves people care more about justice than politics. By noon, Travis Morrison was arrested. 2 FBI agents picked him up at his house, while he was still shaking from his encounter with the bikers. The charges were extensive: stalking, harassment of minors, criminal threats, intimidation. His father's lawyers immediately started making calls, pulling strings, trying to make it go away like they always had. But this time was different. This time there were 200 witnesses. This time there were news cameras. This time the FBI was involved. Not just local police who owed favors to Councilman Morrison. Principal Hendricks was suspended pending investigation. The school board, suddenly aware that news crews were camped outside their offices, issued a statement promising thorough review of all bullying complaints and disciplinary procedures. It was too little, too late, but it was a start. Councilman Robert Morrison held a press conference that afternoon, standing in front of his office building with his lawyer beside him. He denied everything, called the allegations politically motivated attacks, claimed his son was being targeted because of his own position, threatened lawsuits against anyone spreading defamatory lies. But it was too late. The bikers had done what the system wouldn't. They'd given the victims a voice, and that voice was roaring. Parents were organizing. News stations were investigating. The FBI was building their case. And most importantly, children who'd been terrified into silence were finally speaking up, knowing that someone would listen. Aisha was finally safe. She walked into Jefferson Elementary that morning, surrounded by protection, and she'd walk out the same way. Jack had personally assigned rotating escorts. Bikers would be present at the school every morning and afternoon for as long as necessary. Other children who'd been bullied asked for escorts, too, and the bikers said yes. Within days, Jefferson Elementary became the safest school in the state. But the story, it was just beginning to spread. By that evening, Aisha's story was on the national news. By the next morning, it had gone viral on social media. Within 48 hours, Hells Angels chapters across the country were starting their own child protection escort programs. And what happened over the next 2 weeks would prove that one small act of courage can change everything. The next morning, the bikers were there again, and the morning after that, and the one after that. For 2 straight weeks, little Aisha Johnson was escorted to school by a rotating wall of chrome and leather. Never fewer than 20 riders, sometimes 50. And every morning, without fail, Jack Sullivan was there, 7:45 sharp, helmet in hand. A smile for Aisha and a quiet promise in his eyes. You're safe now. But on day 3, something unexpected happened. A shy 4th grader named Marcus, small for his age, glasses too big for his face, a fading black eye, walked up to Jack. "Sir, could someone maybe walk with me too?" he asked. "There are some boys who wait for me behind the gym." Jack crouched down, met his eyes. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus Chun." Jack nodded. "All right, Marcus Chun. Tomorrow morning you meet us here at 8:30, and nobody's going to bother you again." The next day, Marcus had his own escort. 2 bikers walking him to class past the gym where his bullies used to wait. Those kids took one look at the men beside Marcus and disappeared. By the end of the week, 12 kids had escorts, children who'd suffered in silence, finally speaking up. Every time a new name came forward, the bikers said yes. Jefferson Elementary became the safest school in the state. Not because of cameras or security guards, but because of community. And Aisha, she was coming back to life. Within days, she was sleeping through the night. By the end of the week, she had a new friend at lunch. A little girl who loved dinosaurs, too. Aisha was laughing again, eating, playing, being 7. The terrified child who'd walked into that diner 2 weeks earlier was gone. In her place stood a little girl with sunshine in her eyes. When the local news returned, they asked her mother, Tanya, what had changed. Tanya's voice broke as she answered. "They gave me my daughter back. These men everyone said to fear. They protected her heart, not just her body. They gave her childhood back, Aisha started drawing again. Crayon sketches of motorcycles and big men in vests. One showed her holding hands with Jack. At the top, in crooked 7-year-old letters, it read, "Me and Papa Bear." That's what she called him now, Papa Bear. And Jack, the Marine who'd seen war, would tear up every time he heard it. Something else began to change, too. Parents inspired by the bikers started walking kids to school together, neighbors protecting neighbors. The spirit of community spreading wider than the sound of any Harley engine. Meanwhile, justice rolled forward. Travis Morrison, the bully who started it all, pleaded guilty. Probation, therapy, community service, and a lifetime record. His father, the powerful councilman who tried to protect him, lost his re-election by 37 points. The town had spoken. No one is above accountability. The school board overhauled everything. New anti-bullying rules, real reporting systems, real consequences. The system didn't change because it wanted to. It changed because it had to. And through it all, Riverton's view of the bikers transformed. Men once feared were now celebrated. Businesses sponsored community rides. Rosie's Diner hosted a bikes and barbecue fundraiser. The VFW partnered with the Hells Angels for youth mentorship. The town that once crossed the street to avoid them now crossed the street to thank them. But the story didn't stay in Riverton. The video of 200 bikers surrounding Jefferson Elementary went viral. 8 million views in a week. Other chapters took notice. Oakland started their own safe passage program. Then Phoenix, then Atlanta, then Chicago. Within 6 months, biker escorts were happening in 43 states. What began with one frightened little girl had become a nationwide movement. For months later, Riverton held a ceremony in the town square. The mayor handed Jack Sullivan the key to the city. But Jack smiled, looked down at Aisha, and said, "This belongs to you, little one. You're the bravest person here. You started this." He handed her the key. Aisha clutched it in both hands, eyes bright, smile pure. A week later at a school assembly, she stood at the microphone so small they had to lower the stand. "My name is Aisha Johnson," she said. "I was scared once, but I learned something. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. Asking for help doesn't mean you're alone. It means you're brave. If you're scared, tell someone. Keep telling them until someone listens, because there are good people everywhere. You just have to find them." The gym erupted in applause. Teachers cried, parents cheered, and in the back, 20 tough bikers wiped tears from their faces. Because they knew the most important battles aren't fought with fists or guns, but with courage and compassion. And all of it, every single ripple, started because one little girl refused to stay silent. If Aisha's courage inspired you, hit that subscribe button because there are thousands of stories like this. Stories of everyday people doing extraordinary things. Comment. I stand for protecting kids if you believe no child should face their fears alone. Your voice matters. Your engagement tells YouTube that these stories deserve to be heard. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that heroes exist. They don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather. Thanks for watching. Thanks for caring. And remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's asking for help when you need it.